But I've been asked, why fear of the Lord and why not love of the Lord? The Lord is worthy to be praised, right? Like there is no question about it. And to be loved and honored, and because of that love, following him in all the things that he does. We are a selfish people, and just because we love someone doesn't mean we're going to follow them. So there's this idea of fear that is both love and reverence, right? A recognition that God is bigger than us, as well as a love that we recognize that though he's bigger than us, he has catered to us and loved us and given us things. So fear is reverence. It's both fear and love. So it's those two things combined, which creates this holy reverence in which we are to be honoring the Lord. Hey, and welcome back to Bible 365. I am your host, Kathy Carter. I'm reading through the Bible in 1 year using the 1 year chronological Bible reading plan, which is available online at oneyearbibleonline.com. You would download the free chronological Bible reading plan, which means we're reading through it historically from beginning to end, every page, not stopping, doing it all. You can take longer, but reading through every single book in the Bible. And so if there's a downloadable, free printable for you to come up and read with me. So today's day is, we're on day 213, and it's July 31st. And our reading today is Jeremiah 5:20 through 6:30, 2 Kings 22, 3 through 20, and 2 Chronicles 34, 8 through 28. It's actually a pretty short reading today compared to some of the huge Isaiah readings we've had. This is a pretty short reading. So we are historically in the time of Judah is the only kingdom left. Israel was taken out by Assyria. Judah has now been in some ways threatened by Isaiah, but they're the last kingdom. And I think today's reading, this is actually one of my favorite readings. This was one of the things that I was really excited about the first time I ever read it. And I was kind of like, what? Did anyone ever see this before? So this is one of my favorite readings, and it's in the book of Kings, which is my favorite book, I think, in the books of the Bible. So the king is Josiah, and he is only the king of Judah, because again, the king of Israel is gone. They were taken away. They were destroyed. Israel is the area in Israel. Like it looks like Judah kind of holds a little bit of territory in the land of Israel. Like Manasseh and Ephraim still get named, and they are sort of up in the northern kingdom a little bit. And then it said a couple places like they went up to Naphtali. So like the area is still there, but it's kind of decimated. There's not many people. There's not many Jew or Israelite people. I was going to say Jewish people, but there's not many Israelite people actually living there. A lot of people from other areas came in and took over that land, and so it's just mostly decimated. And the reason I know that is because in the prophet Jeremiah, who we're in, he mentions that like Judah saw all this happening, and they still haven't turned away from the Lord, right? So we know that bad things happened to Israel, and yet there was still no turning back to the Lord by Judah because of that. And then God seems like doubly angry because of that. But what we have seen is a few good kings, right? So Hezekiah was a good king. His son Manasseh was a terrible king, but then became a better king in the end of his life. And then after that was his son Amon, who was also not a good king. And now we're King Josiah. And Josiah looks like he's taken down some of the high places, right? So he is leaning more, we look like he's leaning more towards the Lord, but like the people are still not really fully invested in the Lord. Like they don't, God is saying through Jeremiah, like you come to me with your mouth, but like your heart isn't in it. And I think he actually literally says that in Isaiah. But in Jeremiah, he's essentially saying, you say that you're this, you haven't even taken any blame for any of the things that you've done. And so Jeremiah has been, I think, a little bit of a darker book, whereas, which might seem weird because Isaiah talks about like death and destruction all the time, but Jeremiah is like really pegging Judah out to be a really awful people. And they're the ones that are left. And like, they were like, God said, Israel is terrible, but I'm going to call them back and I'm going to remarry them because Judah is so bad. Judah is worse. So here we are. We're going down. We're in chapter 5, and we had finished up in chapter 5 yesterday. And in verse 18 of chapter 5, it says, yet even in those days, declares the Lord, I'm not going to destroy you completely. And when the people ask, why has the Lord our God done all this to us? You will tell them, as you have forsaken me and served foreign gods in your own land, so now you will serve foreigners in a land not your own. So when people go, what happened? Why did your God do this? That you say that this is God, and yet, and yet you are, serving other countries. And they say, because we have turned around and served foreign gods, now we are going to serve foreign people just as well, right? So then going down into verse 20, he says, announce this to the descendants of Jacob. So he's talking to Jeremiah. Jeremiah is a prophet, right, in the land of Judah, and he's a prophet, and he's speaking to Judah, but also a little bit to Israel. He says, announce this to the descendants of Jacob and proclaim it in Judah. Hear this, you foolish people. He's like, you should be trembling at me. You should have fear of the Lord. And I know I have mentioned this before, but I've been asked, why fear of the Lord and why not love of the Lord? How do I get into this? So I've mentioned before that I'm a Gen Xer and I'm like a pull yourself up by your bootstraps kind of person. The Lord is worthy to be praised, right? Like there is no question about it, and to be loved and honored, and because of that love, following him in all the things that he does. We are a selfish people, and just because we love someone doesn't mean we're going to follow them. So there's this idea of fear that is both love and reverence, right? A recognition that God is bigger than us, as well as a love that we recognize that though he's bigger than us, he has catered to us and loved us and given us things. So fear is reverence. It's both fear and love. So it's those two things combined, which creates this holy reverence in which we are to be honoring the Lord, right? So he's like, you don't have that of me. You don't recognize what I am able to do to you when you turn from me, right? Like you're just kind of acting like the passenger in your car, like I'm not all that important. So it says, they do not say to themselves, let us fear the Lord. The Lord is the one who gives autumn and spring rains in season, right? But your wrongdoings have kept these things away. Verse 26, among my people are the wicked. So among those who follow, right, which I would call servants, right, are the things that we call them sort of in Isaiah. Among those who kind of like love me and serve me are the wicked. So the wicked Israelites are living with the serving Israelites. I'm using Israelites as like a full nation of Jacob kind of thing. So they're all mixed up and intertwined with each other. So there are some that follow the Lord, and there are many that aren't following the Lord, right? And they lie. Those wicked ones are the ones lying in wait, right? And he says, shouldn't I punish them? Shouldn't I avenge myself because of this? A horrible and shocking thing has happened in the land. The prophets prophesy lies. So the ones that are said that they are the Lord's prophets, the ones that are bringing the word of the Lord to the people, are bringing lies to the people. The priests are ruling by their own authority. Again, when we don't give the Lord the honor, and by the way, I don't care how often you give the Lord the honor with your lips, that does not matter. If you are genuinely not serving the Lord and honoring him in word, action, deed, heart, right, and all of those things, you're not really honoring the Lord. You're really honoring your own authority. And my people love it this way. So like the priests and everything, they're all lying. Prophets are lying, priests are going by their own authority, and the people are eating it up. The people love it. It says, but what will you do in the end? And I think I talked about this yesterday, the other day. Like, why? Why do we love those lies? And I really think it's because most of those lies are extremely self-serving. Following the Lord is sacrificial. Following the Lord means putting aside your basic wants and desires to follow the Lord and to recognize that the Lord is going to provide you with what you really want, with what you really need. So take out the want. The Lord is going to provide you with what you need, right? So you need to give up some of the things that you might really want in order to have the things that God says you need. So don't follow lies that make you feel really, really good about yourself. Usually those things are not true. Usually those are the hard things. The things that we hear that are from the Lord are usually things that say, give up more of your money, give up more of your time, forgive that person, pick that person up, bring that person some food, right? Like those are usually the things that come easy to us are generally not the things that God is asking for from us. It's usually the hard things. Okay, so he says, my people love it this way. So then we're going to move down to 6, and he tells the people to start running. So he's like, flee Benjamin, get away from Jerusalem, right? So the trumpets are starting to sound, disaster is starting to loom. In verse 2, he says, I will destroy daughter Zion. So we've kind of talked about over and around all these things that Zion represents, the people of Israel, the land of Israel, the perfect thing of Israel, the thing that God loves. And he's like, I'm going to destroy her, so beautiful and delicate. I'm going to bring everything against her. And verse 4, prepare for battle against her. So battle is coming, and you guys need to prepare. Attack at noon. And then it says, this is what the Lord Almighty says. Cut down the trees, build siege ramps. The city must be punished. Take warning, Jerusalem, or I will turn away from you. And again, I feel in some ways he's got both sides a little bit. I feel like he is shouting out in warning to them, right? Like, you're getting a chance to step up and step away from the wicked that you were doing and to come and follow me. But then I think in the same sense, it's like they don't do it. They don't even remotely do it. And so he's like, so I'm going to destroy you. And these seem to be things that he knows and he understands, right? Like, has he seen them? Does he just recognize the wicked nature, that they are too far gone, right? That their hearts are away from him. And so he's calling disaster on them. Going into 6:10, it says, to whom can I speak and give warning? Who's going to listen to me? Their ears are closed, so they're not listening, right? It says the word of the Lord is offensive to them. They find no pleasure in it. But I'm full of the wrath of the Lord, and I can't hold it in. So now it says, the Lord's wrath is going to be poured out on the children in the street, on the young men gathered together, husbands and wife, old and those way down in years. Houses are going to be turned over, their fields, their wives, right? And the Lord is stretching out his hand against all of those things. So again, here we go. We're calling destruction on them. From the least to the greatest, all are greedy for gain. Prophets and priests alike all practice deceit. So it's not even just your regular average person, right? These are what he would deem anointed ones, right? That are supposed to be doing what's right in the eyes of the Lord. They're supposed to be steering people towards him, and they are not. They're doing the wrong thing. So they say, peace, peace, when there is no peace. They're lying. Are they ashamed of their conduct? Nope. They have no shame at all. They don't even know how to blush. So they will fall among the fallen. They will be brought down when I punish them. So they're going to be brought down. They're going to be punished. The Lord is going to take care of that. Moving on, it says, stand at the crossroads and look. So he says, look, but they're not going to. So here we go again. He's telling them to look. He's telling them what to do. They're not going to look. He's going to bring disaster down on them. He says in verse 21, I'll put obstacles before this people. Parents and children alike will stumble over them. Neighbors and friends will perish. So he's continuing to talk about the destruction. He says, an army is coming, a land of the north. They come like men in battle formations to attack you, right? They are dangerous people. And then it says, verse 27, I have made you a tester of metals, and my people the ore. So God has lifted up this people to destroy them, right? So he's lifted up this outside people to destroy them. And their job in this destruction is they're testers of metal. So, and I'm sure maybe many of you have heard this analogy before. You heat up metal, right? And so when you heat it up, you don't melt it. You just heat it up, and then you try and like change it into position, right? So there's making it nicer. And so that's exactly what he's doing. He's using heat, he's using battles, he's using testing in order to, right, make them a better people. God is doing that. And then it says, but, this is a hard one, 29, but the refining goes on in vain. The wicked are not purged out. So even after this refining, and this is why I bring up a little bit of Isaiah, because Jeremiah seems a little bit closer to home, only in that he's like 100 plus years later. And so this is like closer. So at this point now, there's been a handful of kings that have just been awful. And then we're going to find out one of the reasons why they were awful. So there's a handful of kings that have been awful. And so they seem closer to destruction. Like maybe in Isaiah, he was shouting out, crying out in order to bring them back. And then here we are, and they really haven't been brought back. And so it says the wicked aren't even purged. So the wicked were supposed to be purged out, and then the sort of the clean, or what was left, was supposed to rise up and come together, according to some of the prophecies of Isaiah. And maybe because the wicked had not been purged, we're maybe not going to see some of this next steps in our, I'm just putting it out there, right? Just some of the next steps in our prophecy, which again, I'm going to say that I don't think that we've seen. All right, so now we're going down to 2 Kings 22. So 2 Kings 22 is exactly, well, not exactly, but very, very similar to 2 Chronicles 34, right? So they have a lot of similarities. A handful of sentences are different here and there, but for the most part, they have the same story. So the story is this. It's the 18th year of King Josiah's reign. So Josiah is a king that's trying to follow the Lord, right? 18th year in, right? And he's getting all these prophecies of death and destruction from Jeremiah. They know the prophecies from Isaiah, right? Although they put him to death. And this is a couple generations later. And then he sends these people, he's cleaning up the temple. So Josiah is rebuilding, and this might all be normal rebuilding, because these things do happen, right? Buildings start to fall apart. They're old and they start to fall apart. So this is the temple. And so he's rebuilding the temple. And so he's sending these guys, people of his kingdom, right? He's sending them into the temple, and he's saying, make sure that when the money comes in, it goes where it needs to go in order for these people to be able to build the temple, right? So it's going to the workers, it's going to like all of these people building up the temple. When they get there, they make sure all those things happen. But what happens is when they see Hilkiah, he says, hey, I found this book. So this is crazy to me. I found this book. It's the book of the law. So for those of you who aren't necessarily super familiar with these expressions, the book of the law is the first 5 books that we have read in the Bible. So it is Genesis. I might go out of order. Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, Deuteronomy. Pretty sure that's the way it rolls. I could be wrong. That's the book of the law. So they have been living. So this was like hidden. It was lost. How long have they been living without God's word, right? Like, so they've been speaking to God, right? Some of these prophets, but the prophets are lying and they have nothing to test it up against. No wonder they're getting away with lies. There's nothing that says you need to do this. God says to do that. The law says to follow this. So maybe they're handing down some traditions, right? Like, so, because they're still the people of Israel, but they don't have these scrolls in front of them to remind them of all of the laws that God has put in place here, that all of the stories that Moses, right, went through. So then they would know, they would remember all of these things. Are they even celebrating the Passover? I mean, they might be, but they might not be. And if they are, do they remember all the details of the Passover? No wonder they were turning from God. They couldn't remember because they didn't have any of the information. So this information was lost to them to such a point that when they went and read this to Josiah, right? So they went to the king and they read some of this. He was like crying and tearing his robes and covering himself in sackcloth, right? Like this was like a mourning because he had recognized that all of this had been lost and they weren't actually following the Lord. So imagine hearing for the first time, knowing that you had a God somewhere, but then hearing these laws that have been put into play by the Lord that you and your kingdom are not doing. So there had to be some, and he wanted to follow the Lord, right? So he was taking down the Asherah poles and things like that. So he wanted to follow the Lord, right? He was obviously rebuilding the temple, but they didn't have the word of the Lord. So there was a big chunk that was missing. So he tears his robes and then he says, listen, go take this to one of the prophets. Well, they take it to a woman. So a woman is a prophet in the nation at this point. And now I can't make this assumption, but I want to say that God sent them to her specifically because she was somebody who was telling the truth, because he was saying these prophets are liars, right? Or if maybe they took it to her and God just spoke through her. These are kind of details that we don't know, but what we do know is they took it to her. There were obviously other prophets in the nation at that time. Because they said that prophets are lying, so there's obviously prophets there, but they took it to Huldah, right? This wife that doesn't even prophesy from the temple. She's living in a different area. And they took it to her. And so I want to read some of the stuff what she says. So she was the wife of Shallum, son of Tikvah, the son of Haras, keeper of the wardrobe. Nothing special, nothing in particular. She did live in Jerusalem in the new quarter. And she said to them, This is what the Lord, the God of Israel says. Tell the man who sent you to me, this is what he says. I'm going to bring disaster on this place and its people according to everything written in the book the king of Judah has read. So maybe Isaiah was in there as well. Maybe Hosea was in there as well, right? So maybe some of these prophets were also in this book because he's talking about destruction. So it was at least the 5 books of the law because it says the books of the law, but it might have also had some prophets in there because those are the ones that spoke of destruction, right? Those were the things. And he said, I'm going to do all of these things that the king of Judah has read. And he's doing it because they have forsaken me and burned incense to other gods and aroused my anger by all the idols their hands have made. My anger will burn against this place and will not be quenched. Tell the king of Judah, who sent you to inquire, that the Lord, because your heart was responsive and you humbled yourself, right? And you tore your robes and wept in my presence, I have heard you. Therefore, I'm going to gather you to your ancestors so then you don't have to live when all this destruction is coming. So because of the heart of Josiah, he's actually going to be taken away. So death is not always a bad thing, which is interesting considering Hezekiah begged for more time. I think it was Hezekiah. Begged for more time and got an extra 15 years. And Josiah is being taken away because there's going to be disaster that's coming to the nation, and the Lord doesn't want him to live in that disaster. That's how we're ending today. So that is that's an interesting way to end. And again, I feel like it's another reminder of how close we're supposed to stay to the Lord, because he blesses us when we do, like when our hearts are for him, he heaps blessings upon us. So that's it for today. Tomorrow we start August. So we're August 1st tomorrow, and we start in, we're not in a new book. We're still in 2 Kings. So we're still going to continue in where we are. If this has been a blessing to you, I want you to like, share, and subscribe to the channel. And I want you to keep reading. See you guys next time.